Well, I'm delighted today to be speaking to Kristoffer Doura. We're here at East Hotel in Miami. Welcome, Kristoffer.
Well, welcome, David. Thanks for having me.
So wonderful to talk to you today. We're going to talk, you've got a very interesting backstory. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about your practice here in Miami and just your observations from some of the market with the clients that you're dealing with today. So I know when we spoke on the phone a few weeks back, you went straight into your story because it's so interesting. Why don't you give us a little sense of it?
Well, at 6'7", 300-pound, giant, today I feel that I'm blessed in many ways. I thank God first because I'm from the islands, from the West Caribbean, Haiti. And, at birth, nobody knew I was going to be an athlete. But the doctor said at 10 pounds and 9 ounces, this guy's going to be a football player one day. Who would have come to actually find out that would be a reality?
Yeah.
I was a late bloomer. I did 1 year of high school football, and I ended up doing one play in this one game, and that got me a scholarship to college. I took the deal to West Virginia, and I ended up getting a master's degree. But I knew for a fact that I always liked Wall Street.
Yeah.
And Wall Street for me was always kind of like, wow, these guys look rich. These guys are doing well. These guys actually are
exciting kind of atmosphere.
Atmosphere, correct. That made sense. I actually had an opportunity to go pro, and playing offensive lineman. I was a walk-on with the Miami Dolphins, and a great opportunity for me about 13 years ago. But unfortunately, as I had a 3-year career in pro football, it came to an end. It was actually a very bad trauma that kind of took me out of the business. You never expect, things to kind of, turn left when you're kind of putting your everything into it. And not being a guy who was drafted and being a walk-on, you always had to, as they say in the U.S., get the butter from the duck and kind of just push through. I dehydrated pretty severely in Pittsburgh and didn't know what was happening outside of collapsing. And one thing led to another where I was in the hospital and they diagnosed me and said, Chris, it doesn't look good. We got to make a big decision because you dehydrated severely. I'm in fear. I'm 22 years old at the time, didn't know what was happening, never met any of these physicians, and they're telling me we got 2 options and slim to none. What's going on? Speak English. Talk to me, doc. Chris, here's the thing. You actually got a blood clot in your leg. And if you don't make a decision right now, we're going to have to cut your leg off and amputate it. My heart dropped.
Yeah.
When I heard that, David.
For a sportsman to hear that.
For a sportsman to hear that. That was the biggest kind of wake-up call. But for me, I prayed to God and I said, well, whatever happens next, just allow me to kind of get through and see my family. I said, well, where are my other options? They said, here's a 50-50 shot that if we don't cut the leg off, we'll be able to do surgery, but it's really slim to none. And I thought about it. I said, I'm not going back to Miami, Florida from Pittsburgh with one leg. I got to get married. I got to find a wife one day, right? So we went into surgery. As we're going through it, they're performing their operation. And I'll tell you, it's a tingle in my spine to know that my heart flatlined. And I died right there on the stretcher in surgery. And it's still something that I think about because I had the out-of-body experience. And my body went into a phase of unconsciousness, but I held on. One feeling and one side said, Chris, come on over, we're ready to receive you. And the other side said, well, you're scratching the surface, son. You have so much time in front of you, your legacy, your family, the impact you could make. And I held on to that. I felt God was, giving me another opportunity. But my purpose wasn't done. And I realized that I could have an opportunity to do something bigger than just pro sports. God checked me back in and said, I'm checking you back in, son. They resuscitated my heart. They shocked me back with the 2 square pegs. I wake up the next morning, I'm still in distress, I'm sedated. I don't know where I'm at. My head is tick, 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 coming up. I wake up, the first group of humans that I saw was my family. They got on the next flight from Miami to Pittsburgh and they were there when I woke up. I broke down, David. I couldn't hold it to bear. And I knew at that very moment I was hanging up the cleats. And I never turned back. And the reason I never turned back because I'm educated. I made sure to get a master's in business. And I knew that was not going to be my end game was pro sports. I knew at some point I had a backup plan. Yeah. So, that really inspired me.
And you've written a book, haven't you, about all of this?
With what I went through, transitioning out of pro sports and getting into business, I realized that my treasure, my resources, my money, and my volunteer work is in philanthropy. And I realized that that was a big issue as we're talking about trends here when the pandemic hit us all globally. And a lot of businesses lost money. A lot of governments across the world stopped cutting checks. And there are a lot of nonprofits who were not receiving resources. So that made me realize, wow, I've studied up this nonprofit industry, $498 billion industry. Why are there still children, women, and animals and mental health concerns in our public? So I realized that there was some content that I had stored in my mind I needed to put out there. I took a risk. In the pandemic, I could not oversee the 97,000 nonprofits that are registered in Florida. I said, well, I can only Zoom so many people. And that's what I said, I need to put
Something more scalable as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I decided to write a book.
Amazing.
And it became Wall Street Journal bestseller. It's called Let's Get It, 10 Keys to Building Your Nonprofit, the Maximum Impact. I believe in philanthropy. I believe that I can change the world with that book.
And so your core business is financial advice. And so I suppose you weave the philanthropy into that as well with the clients you work with, looking at their financial plans.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I focus on ultra high net worth families, sports and entertainment, and really focused on entrepreneur business owners. And a lot of times when you have wealth, you want to be philanthropic for many reasons, whether it's selfish or for the world per se. And I say that because a lot of philanthropy, it ties back into, well, what are we leaving behind with our legacy? How are we impacting our business, our communities? How are we really reinvesting back into the people? So philanthropy is always a part of my conversation. I always say, let me reverse engineer and say, well, where do you actually want to exit?
Yeah.
And that applies to business, to philanthropy, and to just
what's your
every
goals?
day. Right.
Yeah. And what's your observations from the sports world? I mean, in the UK, we read a lot in the papers about high-flying, high-profile, high-earning at one point sportsmen who now are in financial issues because they're because of mismanagement, because of a variety of factors. Do you see some of those same trends for people who earn a lot of money on the field, but then it doesn't last them their full lives?
Well, the NFL, your first rounder, typically a quarterback, is now signing contracts over 4 to 5 years, and they're signing contracts over $300 million. And when you think about those numbers, it's not guaranteed in NFL like it is in other leagues. But when you think about that, if they don't have the right team, they don't have the right advisor, the support system that helps them understand how to mitigate your risks. The families, the jewelry, the cars, even the fancy clothes, and just spending all that money for the purpose of now. Where I feel like I bring a lot more value is saying, well, I've been there. I've transitioned out of that, but I can speak gridiron football, but I can also speak boardroom.
Yeah.
And that's where I have the ability to educate them on saying, well, let's make sure this money lasts in perpetuity.
And do you look at things like pension planning for them, or looking at a real estate that'll pay an income? Or how do you start to set up a conversation with someone who's earning a lot today but has got a lot of life left in them, and also they don't know how long that earning power will continue?
Fear.
Yeah.
Fear can move mountains. Fear can move people in directions they never thought of in their life. It's easy for a young 20-year-old to, strike a big deal, have an opportunity to get into some type of professional league, but they haven't thought, well, how am I going to actually manage what I've just received? So where I come in is I like to build a relationship first and, take them out to eat, get to know them on a personal level. What I've been talking about finances, because ideally the only trust you build with an athlete is by getting to know them. I'm still an athlete to this day. I get up at 4:30 in the morning. I'm still training. So when I think about how do I approach these individuals, well, they're business owners. They're their own entities. They have their own LLC corporations here in the U.S. But when you're looking at their brand, you're looking at the opportunity for them to be able to diversify where they're investing, how they're investing. Hard, tangible assets are one key, but how do we keep the liquidity?
I mean, are players more switched on, do you think, to exploiting their brand potential now than previously? Because there's so many commercial opportunities and there's so many role models, I guess.
Great evaluation,
Yeah.
David, because here we have something with the NCAA, the National College Association. They provide these young athletes what we call NIL deals, name, image, and likeness. So you have players who are not even out of college yet striking $300,000-$400,000 deals, or even millions of dollars before they even get to a pro league. So that has overall, in my abilities, I feel that it has impacted and corrupted the mindset of the athlete. And when they transition to the professional world, now it's only about the money. Now, growing up in my days, probably our days, we played because we loved it. We had the heart, but obviously we were going after the big check. Don't get it twisted. But in reality today, it's so diluted now with the money. And that's where the impact is, because if you get a big check early, what are you going to do to make it last past your 3-year average career? And if you get hurt like how I did, hopefully you have somebody guiding you.
Do you find as well that real estate investments appeal particularly for those who haven't had a lot of education, as it were, and look at financial markets as something quite frightening, and they see the rental of a property as being something more straightforward? I mean, when you look across different asset classes with sports stars, who've got different levels of education, how do you kind of tackle that?
Well, the conversation around a hard, tangible asset is a lot easier to absorb than the financial jargon that, people like financial professionals understand.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the difference, where you have to be able to really get to know the person's profile and the risk to really identify, well, what's the best overall portfolio for that person? And now you construct something where you have maybe some hard assets, maybe you have some, securities, maybe you have alternative investments, and you really look at it from the holistic perspective.
And they trust you, so they don't need to understand
Right.
every detail. They go, we've built a bond and trust,
Right.
and therefore you're looking after me.
I didn't spend all these years getting my certifications for nothing, David.
And flipping, I suppose, the other end of the spectrum, if you like, to the family office world, very sophisticated clients, say around Miami, Florida area, there's a lot of wealth here. How do you deal with the more sophisticated client? What kind of things might they want from you, or how do you work with them?
Well, I talk about succession planning. I talk about exit strategies to really identify, how are they thinking about the dynasty trust, transferring the wealth, really looking at enhancing overall their wealth valuation. Because when you think about it, there's always a wealth gap. The money in your business that's locked in is not necessarily the money that you're going to get when you transition and exit, unless you've thought about the risk of building that management structure, of being able to put the right team in place, and then now thinking, well, how are we going to scale this business? So that conversation always starts with reverse engineering, understanding and identifying the goals of that family office to now understand, well, what is their pedigree? How do they see the trends? What is their overall portfolio invested in? Are they concentrated mostly in hard assets? Or are they thinking of different types of alternative assets? And I think today, with so much technology and so much of these trends that people are becoming billionaires, in less than 10 years, or even 1 year if you strike and get lucky. But I think when you're talking about family offices, a different level of sophistication, that you have to understand the exit planning. And that's really the conversation that starts to open up the can of worms that sometimes you have to focus on.
And Miami seems to continue to boom. Do you see from your desk? Do you see new wealth coming to Miami and to Florida more generally?
Tremendous wealth.
Yeah.
I mean, when we're looking at taxes, we're looking at our weather.
Yeah.
We're looking at just the
overall lifestyle.
The lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's the lifestyle that people didn't have before, and they only got a piece of it. They only tasted that lifestyle during a vacation. But if you can have that year round for 365 days, but now you have the ability to transition your business. A lot of hedge funds, a lot of corporations, they're transitioning out of those triple tax states, and they're on their way here to Florida, because now they see they can work remote. The pandemic really impacted us tremendously, because now businesses can work based off of a mobile phone, and you can be anywhere in the globe. And I think that's now the trend here in Florida.
And what's your take on relationship between the US and the UK? I mean, worked over in London for a few months going back a few years.
Mind the gap.
But what's your read on, I mean, the sports sector is a good example in the football, for example, with US-UK cooperation and the, transatlantic cooperation, also in other parts of the media world. The US-UK is super strong. What's your read from down here?
Well, from down here, obviously the rules are a little bit different.
Yeah.
And obviously the investment proposition is a little different. When you think about the UK, I think it's a great economy. It's a strong economy. There could be some challenges everywhere globally. But I think if we could collaborate more, US investors and UK investors, and now really think about how do we, create a pipeline, whether that's through energy, whether that's through pharmaceuticals, whether that's through health and medicine, or even sports. Because I think sports really is the angle where it doesn't matter if you are a Republican or you're a Democrat or you're independent. Sports brings in everybody across the world. And I think that is where we can have more conversations because of the trends happening today. We just signed Messi to Inter Miami, the biggest contract in MLS.
Yeah.
So just imagine a guy just left from Argentina. He got, $1 billion offers, from the Dubai and some of those other, other Emirate countries. But when you think about why did he choose Miami? I go back to the weather, the lifestyle, and the taxes.
Fantastic. Well, look, Kristoffer, terrific to talk to you today, and we look forward to sharing this interview.
Thank you, David. It was a pleasure.
The latest technical content delivered through global conversations with professionals for professionals.